have to understand that the drive for change has to be there, the energy around transformation. So if we're going to, both males, men and women in our society, deconstruct what we have constructed, we have to have a purpose. We have to have a reason for it. And that reason has to be strong enough to drive us towards the value that we want to deliver as a result of it. And understanding that the two come in balance. They're in harmony together at all times. And it's a cyclical process. As you're working through that balance constantly throughout the journey of change, it's a pathway. This is a photograph I took from a local beaver pond area, and that day was brilliant with the reflections. And so you can see the eye, the circle represented here. We have to view, we have to reflect, and make sure that those reflections are delivered with our teams, and that we listen to our team members reflect on their own journey, and that we understand the perceptions of all of the receivers of that value, so that we understand that it is visible and that it continues to support the drive for change. This is a really, really interesting photo. This was a butterfly. I had seen this butterfly a couple of times previously. I had actually captured it on my camera, but I didn't really pay attention to it until it landed at my feet. It landed right beside my shoe. My shoe is just off camera on the bottom of the screen here. And this butterfly is sitting there, and it sat there for a good minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes, which a butterfly never does. They flit and they flirt and they go from place to place all the time. But I got so intrigued by it that I went home and I looked it up. And I looked up the name of this butterfly. The name of this butterfly is a mourning cloak. And wow. Because what happens on our reflective journey, first thing that happens is we mourn the loss. We grieve for what we had before. There's going to be a lot of grieving when we come back from the COVID-19 lockdown, because we will not ever get back to what we had before. And what we had before was beautiful and wonderful, but do we ever want to get back to that? It was never perfect in the first place. It was good, it was bright, but understand that everybody coming through this change is going to have to go through mourning, is going to wear their mourning cloak for a period of time. And we have to, as leaders, consciously create an environment that allows people to go through the grieving process, instead of going through addictions or distractions or some other way to cope. Enable them to actually grieve and grieve properly through that process, because that grieving process, if you skip it, if you skip any steps, it's going to hit you blindside down the road. So helping people actually go through that grieving process helps them adjust their perception and the visible value that they're achieving along the way. Also at leaders, and this has been mentioned many times, the flow of energy. It's a waterfall. It's like this one was sparkling in the sun when we went, and I could barely walk this day actually, and I had to climb down about 50 feet of staircases to go and visit and view this waterfall. And oh my, was it ever worth it. It was just stunning and sparkling. There's all these layers and levels of rocks. Imagine you're a business team and all the layers and levels of rock that you have to flow over, all the layers and levels of culture and perceptions and ideas and spirituality along the way that have to be cleared and moved out of the way in order for you to move along. At the same point, understand that water as a symbol is an amazing symbol, and in all of its forms, solid, gaseous, and liquid, all of them, and I see them regularly here in the snowy mountains of Canada. But this is a nice spring waterfall. There's a lot going on. Imagine the strength and the power of water to flow around barriers, to flow in curves, And it's not just a straight line. It will never be a straight line. But as a leader, it's our job to clear the barriers and understand that as a leader, no matter what you do, every single incremental little step will break stone down. And so we have the power, we have the strength as leaders to consciously clear the barriers, to consciously get out of the way of ourselves and our team to achieve the results that we're looking to achieve. And that's how you create the impossible and make it possible. The other way to do that is enable and allow for speaking up and sharing of diverse ideas. The speaking up is critical. People need to have a voice, and having their voice actually makes the experience much brighter, much more vibrant, and much more sustainable in the long run. Because you're not just looking to implement a one-time change in most cases. Certainly in this case, we don't want to just implement something and then let it slide and go away. We want to actually generate a whole new culture globally, but that requires speaking up. That requires all the different voices, all the different races, all the different, masculine, feminine voices, all of the different harmonies that we have globally, indigenous, and sharing all the diverse ideas. It's only when you get the greatest diversity in ideas, as Mother Nature does in the natural environment. You'll notice that Mother Nature tends toward diversity. And, as we have been doing in our cultures, we've been simplifying, and reversing that whole diversity concept into separation and distinction. Instead, when we go the other way and we open up to diversity, and this is certainly what I noticed on one of my last working teams, when I embraced all of that diversity and I started to work with it all and sharing the diverse ideas on the various different levels and the teams in the organization, I was able to break through some barriers that had been there for many, many years. The project had actually failed twice before I got involved, and I was able to bring it to successful conclusion because I opened up to all the different voices. And listening skills as a leader are key, not just listening with your mind, not just listening to the words, not just listening to the tone of voice either. Listening to the heart, listening to the purpose underneath the speaking, listening to understand what that person is expressing, listening from the feminine, listening from the masculine, understanding to hear from a different place, a different point of view than your own is. And so there's a lot of really new skills that are necessary in that arena. If you think about it, and actually this slide just came to me in the last 2 minutes as I was listening to Pete. And the views that you need to hold in the new future are as if you are viewing the world through a prism. And when you look at the prism of Mother Nature, the rainbow, the absolute beauty of the colors, they all come together and they look brilliant. But you know what? They were all generated separately in their own individual way, lighting up the arena. This is an actual photograph of where I live. I was in the doctor's office the one day. I looked out the window and I saw this, it's called a sundog reflection. It's like a mini rainbow. And it happened to be over the peak of our three sisters, over the peak of one of the three sisters in our area. The three sisters have three names. The highest peak, the one where the rainbow is, her name is Faith, or Big Sister. The middle sister is Hope, and the small sister is Charity. So Faith had a rainbow that day, and I had to run out of the doctor's office to get this photo because it just so captured me in the beauty and the resonance of what I was trying to say to people, that it's a rainbow, it's a prism, and that mountain of faith that we have is critical in letting the team do their work, letting the team be as brilliant as they are going to be, letting the team express their voices along the way, and then guiding and directing as the leader as you work through that conscious creation of purpose. This one is fascinating. So on teams, one of the times, every so often, you're going to find it difficult. You're going to find it challenging. I was on a hike with my husband, who is an avid mountain hiker. I had just moved to the mountains after almost a 30-year sedentary career where I was sitting on my butt most of the days. I was not in the shape to tackle big mountains, and we went on a hike. And it was a rainy day. There were mosquitoes all over the place. It was hot because I was wearing a raincoat, and it was a warm day. So when you wear a raincoat, you just sweat underneath. And then, of course, all of the mosquitoes are attracted, especially to me, because I usually wear bright clothing, and they love bright clothing. So here I am, and I'm miserable. I'm like, in my head, I'm just complaining the whole way. We started at 6,000 feet, and this trail actually went up 1,000 feet, so to 7,000 feet. I was out of breath. I was out of shape. I'm wet. I'm miserable. And all of a sudden, I see this animal on the trail about 50 feet ahead of us. And I turned to my husband, Mark, and I said, well, what is it? He said, well, it's a bush hen. And I said, okay, well, that's kind of cool. And I thought, okay, well, let's just take this moment while the bush hen is there and have a drink of water. So took out my backpack and freed up and was getting ready to have a drink of water. In the meantime, this bush hen was walking towards us. He actually came and he was at my feet, like literally right there. So you can see that the photo that I took was straight down, and there he is in all his brilliant color. And it was really fascinating because he was chittering away at me. I don't know what he was saying. I have no idea, no clue, but he was chittering away at me, and he was just the whole time. And then I would move, and he would move with me. And then I moved back the other way, and he moved with me. I would step back, and he stepped forward. And so I was dancing with this bush hen in this middle of this miserable trail, and my head space cleared. And I was like, I was able to enjoy the moment. I was able to live in the moment. I was able to be open to the dance of beingness, of being there. And this is a key message learning in the leadership journey that I've been on, is to be open to the dance of being, even when there's all kinds of pressures going on around you, even when there's all kinds of other people looking for your attention and wanting you to be there for them, be there for them. And what I have here is a series of 4 different images, and this represents the diversity of the types of workers that you're going to have. You may have the bee, the bee who is impossible flight. They can't fly based on the wingspan that they have. It's not possible, and yet they do. And that's the worker that is doing so much for you. They're busting their butt, and they are actually producing with no appreciation and no gratitude given to them. Appreciate them, because it's really, really important that they keep those wings flapping and they fly and they pollinate from flower to flower, because that's our very life itself. Then there's the one who sticks their head out of their protection mechanism. They're protected all the way around, but they stick their head out just to see what's going on, and then they pop back in again, just like this little bird that was in their tree nest. The other one I find fascinating. This was a woodpecker that we had found along the way, and just fascinating. He actually stayed around for a really long time, pecking out the sap from this tree, and went home to find out that, wow, you know what its name is? This beautiful bird, this absolutely stunning creation of Mother Nature, is called a yellow-bellied sapsucker. And I'm like, wow, a name means everything. What we call each other, what we call ourselves means everything. How we speak to ourselves, the language we use means everything. Does it change the way that you look at this bird now that you know its name and the connotation of that name that we have in our society? What we have attributed to yellow belly is being a coward. Is this a coward bird? No, it's brave, it's brilliant, it's beautiful. So what we call everybody on our team, how we name people, how we label people, really, really important not to do that or label them in some way that is empowering and enlightening, because it helps to support them. And the final picture here is a muskrat. Now, muskrats are really interesting creatures. And of course, there's a little song that was written in the 70s called Muskrat Love. And I don't know if you know it, but it's a beautiful little song. But I wanted this muskrat to be a beaver because it was in the beaver pond. It was right beside the beaver lodge. It actually came out of the beaver lodge and went into the beaver lodge. And I'm like, that's a beaver. It has to be a beaver. And so I was trying to convince my husband that this is a beaver. And he took out his binoculars and he looked really close. He said, no, that's a muskrat, honey. And I'm like, wow. You know, I was so invested in convincing him that it was a beaver that I didn't, for a minute, allow myself to realize that the muskrat is just as lovely as a beaver and just as important to our ecosystems as the beaver is. And I learned to love this little muskrat. And there will be people on your team like all of these different images that represent that. And understand that as we go through changes, especially these impossible changes, solving wicked problems that are in our world. And the definition of a wicked problem is a problem that when you go to solve it, fights you back. So, you know, understand that lifestyle changes, job losses, gains, income risks, identity value changes, expectations, predictability gaps will generate grieving, loss, frustration. Connecting to values will awaken purpose that helps overcome the challenges of grieving, frustration, uncertainty, and loss.